All right, I assume we still have everybody on the line?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
All right, so this conference call is going to be put on YouTube, and it's going to basically be a discussion with Mike Craven. Mike Craven is the owner and operator of Mike's Olympic Gym, also known as True Fitness Solutions, out of Mechanicsville, Virginia, which is just outside of Richmond. And we also have Jack Thurston on the line. Jack, remind me, what state are you in?
I'm in Idaho.
Idaho. And briefly, I'd like to give both y'all the opportunity for a minute or two to just kind of explain your background. I know, Mike, you've self-studied in nutrition and specifically exercise science. If both of y'all want to just kind of take turns and share a little bit about your background and expertise and stuff like that.
Yeah, my background's been basically self-taught, but it's basically working on the side of preventative health care where we're trying to make a difference in how exercise being practically applied in a manner that, again, comes from what we learn from exercise science. The invested time becomes more enhanced because we're trying to create the physiological changes that occur from a program that's structured correctly. So I'm, just like everybody, I'm trying to constantly be open to learning what right now doesn't really get talked about a whole lot, and you see it every day when it comes to how our healthcare is set up, as far as confusion, inconsistencies, fraudulent claims. So it's encouraging to find anybody who has some of the same thought processes that we've got to be open to learning, because if we're not open to learning and we just keep following in a direction that's commonplace, sometimes it's not in the best interest.
Mike, how long has your gym been up and running?
30 years.
30 years, and just briefly maybe describe some of the people that you've trained, professional athletes, world Olympians.
At the moment, we've got 11 world champions, 17 national champions, numerous state champions in the sport of competitive lifting, powerlifting. And then we've got a wide fluctuation of people that come here that have had heart attacks or on the side of having stents put in, things where they're trying to make lifestyle changes, people with diabetes, people overweight. So we've got a population that's a wide group of performance enhancement athletes wanting to train and find the best mannerisms to train. And then you've got people that are taking more concern of how to exercise to be healthier.
Got it. All right, Jack, you want to share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I'm here. My name is Jack Thurston. I live in northern Idaho. I became interested in nutrition about 20 years ago, about around the year 1994, when my father died of a heart attack after having been to supposedly one of the top cardiologists in the country at that time. And I think he had more than one operation, constituted anywhere from 2, 3, or 4 bypasses. I think the quadruple bypass was the last big one that he had. And on his desk, on the day that he was in the hospital and had passed away, I saw a book on his desk where he was just now finding out about some things about alternative nutrition. And there was a book laying on his desk there, and I could see that he was studying the properties of garlic. And it was kind of disheartening after he passed away, because he had just, in my estimation, just got onto the track, but it was too little too late. So I've had kind of a personal interest in the area of nutrition. Most of my background and study has been in orthomolecular medicine, hygiene, hygienics, which is a field of medicine, and just all-around nutrition. And with the things that have transpired in this country in the course of over the last century, I began seeing a trend where all the things that we require in our bodies in the form of nutrition to allow our bodies to heal themselves and to repair themselves and to regenerate themselves have been consistently, time and time again, in all our foodstuffs, the nutrients have been removed. And I became interested when I realized that our bodies have a tough time dealing with foreign ingredients in our body that don't represent any nutritional value to the body, because the body can't use them. And when the body can't use them, the body finds some way to get rid of them. And I just became engrossed in all of it, and began centering myself around a few basic nutritional types of nutrition, that being vitamins, minerals, amino acids, enzymes, long chain sugars, and here recently have been doing a lot of research into saturated and polyunsaturated oils as they apply to the human anatomy and biology. That's pretty much where I am today. I'm in the process now of just securing what I believe to be the essential nutrients, and when I say the word essential, I mean those nutrients that aren't manufactured by the body itself from other nutrients that we need to get in our food. So essential nutrients would be just those things which we need to get from our food because the body doesn't make them itself. And to date, I've narrowed that down to about 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, and about 12 amino acids. And currently, I'm looking for sources other than mainstream sources for those particular nutritional elements. And I'm here today because we're going to see if we can clear up some things and make a distinction between the table salt that most people use in their diets and full-spectrum mineral salts that have not been stripped of their mineral and chloride constituent elements, and how all of this goes to maintaining health in the body.
Awesome. And before we launch head first into that, I just want to give all the listeners an opportunity for anybody listening to this broadcast on YouTube. You can find Mike Craven's website, truefitnesssolutions.com. Is not functional at the moment, but you can find him and contact him through either Google or through his Facebook page, which is facebook.com/truefitnesssolutions, and then on YouTube, youtube.com/truefitnesssolutions. Do you want to plug any sites that you're involved with, whether it's related or not? I know you've got some legal land experience as well. Did you want to plug anything like that, Jack?
Not really. If anybody would have any questions for me or would like me to go into any detail outside of the conference at a later time, I could invite them to check out my Facebook page at facebook.com/Jack.Thurston, THURSTON.94. That's facebook.com/Jack.Thurston, THURSTON.94. I probably actually won't be in there to respond to anyone until the first of the week. If you go in and check the page out, you should be able to under the About section, you should be able to find a phone number there for me if you need to contact me before that. If not, you're more than welcome to contact either Mike or Nathan. I believe they both have my number. If you don't mind, I can just give the number out here on the conference.
Yeah, whatever you're comfortable with, Mr. Thurston.
Sure, you bet. Yeah, the number to reach me would be area code 208-276-3172. That's 208-276-3172. And that pretty much does it for me.
All right, appreciate that.
You bet.
All right, so let's kick this off. You were just talking about salt, and just a brief background and why we're getting into this. What Mike Craven does at True Fitness Solutions is he practically applies exercise science, like he alluded to a few minutes ago, and a big big aspect of that is preventing heat-related illnesses and deaths and you can do, and Mike will explain that, but obviously hydration is a big factor in that, along with your sodium levels, but in particular, which is what we're going to be talking about, what kind of sodium. So, Mike, I'm going to let you briefly explain the prevention side of heat-related illness, and then from there, we'll have Jack kind of discuss what sodium is, discuss the different types of sodium, and then we'll just go kind of dive headfirst into the rest of that. So, Mike, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, if you look this year, the sad fact is we've had 6 exertional heat stroke deaths in sports related to football this year. One was at the college level at Morgan State, and others were at numerous high schools. And when you again research and look at how some of these deaths are still occurring, a lot of time the first assumption is, well, they must be dehydrated. They didn't get enough water. Well, in fact, 2 of the deaths this year came from water intoxication. So the young men having cramps, which was a sign of heat illness, they basically left the practice field, and when they were on their own at home, they were drinking volumes of water. And what my understanding was, again, the amount of water they were drinking to the amount of sodium or the correct balance, and basically their brain swelled to the point where they died from water intoxication, drinking too much water too soon. And then when you look at the issues of exertional heat stroke and say, all right, well, another issue is producing more heat than your circulatory system can release. And with football being a high-intensity sport, with no identification of which young people today, and not making excuses for them, but if they don't get as much activity, if they are more sedentary, how many teams are doing any identifying what the peak aerobic capacity is of the individual before they go to do the high-intensity effort? So
Understood. And just to be clear, just real quick, you've referred to a couple times this year, but what you mean is 2014, right? Last year?
I'm sorry, 2014. Yes, this past football season.
And just as an added note, this doesn't necessarily exclusively deal with football players. It could be people in the military, firefighters, any individual out there who cannot metabolize the heat production that they're incurring, or something like that. So correct?
So you're exactly right. What you got going on, like with the football, and they start in August, and that's when you've got environmental temperatures that are at its peak for humidity and heat, but you've got also metabolic heat production where you've got the nature of the sport. Just the nature of the sport is high intensity. Well, repeated high intensity efforts that's coming from the muscles producing the heat combined with the environmental heat gain, if you've got people with low aerobic capacities that can be identified through peak VO2 testing, these people have the ability to store more heat than they can release. And
right.
That factor of motivation, because coaches are motivators, as coaches sometimes do, they push people without awareness that the reason this kid has such a lag in recovery or the inability to keep up is he's got a very underdeveloped aerobic system that you can see that right now, even at the Division I level, they're not testing for. And even if they were testing, what's troublesome, there's no period of time or block of training like what we do in the weight room for absolute or speed strength, which is dominant to the sport, but they train that year-round. There's no training time of the aerobic system for the individual as if it's a measured strength. And when we look at that, the other issues are, well, if some people have a tendency to be salty sweaters, and they actually, as they're dehydrating, they're losing more salt than another teammate, then here we go again about what are they taking in their bodies, and this is where Jack can speak up because I'm learning more about it myself. But what are they taking in from what people are giving them that can keep that balance for the body to have if they lose more salt than another person, then it's not just about the water, it's about how can you replace that. And then the same token with what we perceive, it's only because of what we know. But let's say Gatorade gives us the assumption that it's the right balance, and then we start to find out that even with that commercial product, it's not the right balance. And what can we do better?
Okay. And for the listeners who are listening and maybe don't have a sound or a complete understanding of human anatomy and physiology, how does salt exactly play a role in hydration? Either one of y'all can answer that.
In hydration, well, again, we have to make a distinction between common table salt, which has been stripped of somewhere between 80 to 94 plus elemental trace minerals and electrolytes, and a salt that, and also in the question of table salt, has also been heated to temperatures that has gassed off the chloride, leaving some perverted, twisted, adulterated form of sodium, which is probably closer to sodium hydroxide or sodium hydroxate in the body, which is poisonous. And when the body takes that type of salt when that type of salt is taken into the body, it has the nasty habit of raiding all of the cells in our body and releasing all of the structured water that the body has worked so hard and expended such large amounts of energy in structuring inside of our cells, as opposed to the type of salt that we were given, and I believe one of the reasons that it was given to us is because somebody saw someday in the future that we'd be looking for alternate sources of these minerals, and these minerals form the foundation of the soil in our internal body terrain, without which nothing else can really provide any advantages or health benefits. And I'm speaking of other nutrients, and including vitamins and other classes of nutrients, amino acids, et cetera, unless the substrate, the foundation of minerals, has been laid down in the body, there are myriads, literally hundreds of metabolic processes that, although they still go on in the body, they become rate limited because these processes are deprived of the nutrients that they normally utilize to perform the body's metabolic functions. So there you have a fairly clear distinction between the two types of salt, and any of you who've ever read any articles pertaining to salt, you'll find that a big part of the confusion is that no one, even in medical research and trials, I read papers all the time where they talk about salt or they talk about sodium, but they will not acknowledge the fact that we have a nutritionally depleted form of salt that we're putting into our bodies, via the grocery stores and the food chains and everything else. And it's just like everything else. Our salt has been bleached. The minerals have been stripped. Our sugar has been bleached. The minerals have been stripped from the sugars. Our flour has been degraded. Now it's genetically modified, and the nutrients out of our flour have been stripped out of it. The flour is no good anymore either. Everything is bleached, and burned. And this applies to the salt just as well as it does to the flour and to the sugar.
Awesome. And you said that this processed salt that's, in reality, like the mainstream salt, the salt that is the most pushed and the salt that's quite a significant, large majority that's in our actual foods, unless you get like some processed
absolutely.
foods.
If it's processed or packaged food, the sodium, if there's a listing on the back in the ingredients for either sodium or salt, be clear that what we're talking about is we're talking about refined and heavily processed, chemically washed and burned salt.
And that sound, when you say it's heated up and burned, that sounds very similar to how milk is homogenized, and through that homogenization process, that good bacteria is removed. Is that a similar comparison?
Absolutely. And also, if any historian or medical historian buffs out there, some of you may even know this already, but for 5,000 years, broad-spectrum mineral sea salt has been the number one antibiotic on the planet. And actually, that's a good thing to know at this particular time, because as you're all aware of, we have antibiotic resistance developing in the population. I believe the last, I may be falling behind here and not currently up to date, but the last thing I knew about was, we had this thing called MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, and I think the next step they took up from there was to develop another antibiotic called vancomycin. Well, now we have VRSA, vancomycin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, and these guys cannot manufacture antibiotics fast enough to keep up with morphing and the changes in this this resistant staph virus. That it's like a race, and the antibiotic resistance is winning. Whereas,
and since we're on the, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Since we're on the antibiotic topic for a second, but only for a quick second, can you name maybe 6 natural antibiotics? Like, isn't garlic and apple cider vinegar?
Garlic definitely has antibiotic properties. There's a plethora of herbs out there with antibiotic properties. Antibiotic, I believe honey and or cinnamon, or the combination of the two, provides antibiotic properties, natural antibiotic properties for the body. So both of those would be antibiotic. I'm thinking about turmeric, but that's probably more anti-cancer. But actually, turmeric, I found, is an estrogen antagonist. It actually reduces the production of estrogen in our bodies. And we can cover that in depth later if you're interested, but that's another big problem that we have today. We talk about all the mineral and all the nutrient deficiencies that have been imposed upon the population, through different agencies and whatnot. But one of the things that is not being talked about a whole lot out there is that not only women but men also, as a population, we're becoming estrogen dominant. That's destroying our health as well too. I can probably, I don't have all that information at my disposal right now. I probably should have a list of other food items. I mean, common, whole food, real foods that have antibiotic properties. Hydrogen peroxide, anything that involves the increase of oxygen is automatically antibiotic.
Okay.
Would have
appreciate
antibiotic
that.
properties. Sure, you bet. Baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, same thing.
So Jack, you briefly talked about the adulterated aspect of table salt and what table salt has transformed into, which of course is nothing new. Now, can you explain to the listeners and to us as well the difference between that and Epsom salt and sea salt and pink Himalayan salt?
Sure. Before I get into that, I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier. I think, it was Mike, something Mike said earlier, yeah, that he equated, or you was talking about in the sports industry, that they equated cramps to heat illness. I'm taking that what was meant there is that when an athlete is cramping up, having muscle cramps, that is automatically equated to heat illness. Is that correct?
Yes. In other words, one of the symptoms that you would see a lot of athletic trainers looking towards is the boy on the sideline cramping up, and that being one of the factors that's listed under heat illness.
Right.
Yes,
now, how many times when this muscle cramping takes place is the victim also dealing with, say, some kind of trauma or shock?
Exactly. Yeah. And again, exactly. A lot of times.
Because the first thing that comes to my mind when you say muscle cramps, and I think it's interesting that you equated that with heat illness, or what the sports industry calls heat illness. The first thing that comes to my mind there is a immediate requirement for high amounts of magnesium.
Okay.
To relax
so there you go back.
muscles.
There you go back with the issue of the proper minerals.
Right.
And what that really means is it's not necessary. If I'm understanding correctly, it's not necessarily due to a heat-related illness. It sounds like, because you mentioned the magnesium aspect of it, it sounds like it has more to do with simple dehydration. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and there's something there that's inhibiting the body's ability to release heat through the normal process of perspiration. Something that came to my mind while he was talking about that earlier was the fact that, and I don't know whether this goes anywhere to anything, but we as a people have a habit of using things like antiperspirant, antideodorants, and stuff like that, and clogging up our pores. Which are the pathways for this respiration process, this heat, this temperature exchange on the surface of the skin, and a couple of other things that we're talking about all ties into this as well. But the problem is the heat exchange, the temperature, the gradient is not being managed across the skin to near air barrier, and they're not able to eliminate the heat from their bodies. And I have no doubt whatsoever that if they're using table salt in their diet and it's robbing the cells of all the structured water, I can see how that respiration perspiration process would break down, and it would inhibit the release of inhibit the temperature exchange that takes place through the skin and being able to release certain items or elements through the pores so that the body can cool itself down.
Understood.
Jack,
okay.
On
Go ahead, Mike.
The point you made, and again, you made me just think of it again. Speak a little bit about the issue about the common table salt and the intercellular ability to hold water compared to Himalayan salt. And the only thing it makes me think back to is, again, when we had salt tablets in the 70s that were being taken like madmen.
Right. And let me be clear here. And the only reason we should probably reference, when we're talking about the salt, we just reference broad spectrum mineral sea salt. So the reason why I talk about the pink Himalayan sea salt is because it's the stuff I have the most experience with, and also it's the only salt I can find that has the largest amount of minerals, both elemental and trace, as well as the electrolytes in it. But there are, you have other forms of salt. You have the Celtic sea salt, Mediterranean salt, gray salt. Although the truth be told, all of those have a lesser number of minerals, but I think any of those would satisfy the requirements for the 60 key minerals that are indicated as essential minerals for the human body. So you can, if you just say sea salt, although you got to be careful there too, because another thing that the salt industry does is when they go out to these deposits, if they've never been here before, one of the things they do, because it's the easiest and they've got to start from the beginning, they will just slice off these huge layers of literally what mostly is just sodium and chloride from the top of these deposits, because it's the easiest to get to. And a lot of people don't have the understanding that these mineral-rich deposits are found in the very bottom of these deposits. And it makes sense because minerals are heavier than water. So the larger number of minerals and the richer, larger quantities of all of the minerals would be located towards the bottom of the deposit as opposed to the surface. That's another thing that you might want to be aware of. But as far as the elements, the elemental minerals in the sea salts at the cellular level, one of the things that we have to understand with regard to what we're speaking about here is that the water or hydrogen and oxygen cannot be pulled into the cells and say be rerouted where they belong, instead of this water piling up and being deposited in the brain and causing cerebral swelling, God knows what other elements up there. That is due to the inability of the salt, of the magnesium particularly, or the water in this particular case, to be pulled into the trillions of cells in our body, and that happens when there are not sufficient levels of magnesium in the extracellular fluid. This is exactly part of what's going on in this anomaly that Mike's talking about here, which is related to sports.
So
here we got a false impression that that what we're guiding allows that homeostasis, and it's just not going to be there.
You're right. Absent those minerals, absolutely.
Absent those minerals. Now here, okay.
So Epsom salt is a magnesium sulfate-based salt.
Right.
Is that
Right.
an
It's
accurate
a compound
description?
of magnesium and sulfur.
So
Which, by the way, both of those elemental minerals, both magnesium and sulfur, are contained in sea salt in fairly large amounts.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my next question. If sea salt and Himalayan salt has the same properties as Epsom salt, and from our conversation yesterday, Epsom salt is more concentrated in magnesium, whereas Himalayan salt and sea salt is more of a broad spectrum salt.
Yeah, the levels
correct?
would be comparatively lower in the sea salt based on any given weight.
Right.
Right.
So it sounds like what we got going on here in the United States is that we have millions and millions of people, and really this is probably a global epidemic as well. But just talking about the United States, we have tons of people who eat whatever, and of course some people add salt to their food. Some people, and a lot of processed food especially contains sodium, even something like Gatorade. So what's happening is people are getting getting this this mineral or this salt that is in reality pretty much empty when it comes to nutritional value, and as a result of the emptiness in nutritional value, it creates, it creates an offset homeostasis, or just a bad environment for the human body, which can cause chronic problems and
it's the vampire in the room. It's sucking all the water out of us.
So maybe Jack, can you talk about some of the implications and some of the chronic things that people can experience from a lack of having a nutritionally valued sodium or salt in their diet? And then after he's done, Mike, could you kind of talk about that aspect when it comes to people training, or whether it's football or running a marathon, or something like that?
Sure.
Yeah, I can. I've got a short list here without going into detail. The health benefits of using sea salt, and this would be more than likely in what they call a hypertonic solution, but I mean, just eliminating table salt from your diet and replacing it with pink Himalayan sea salt is going to begin to make changes in anyone's body. One of the many things that it does, the mineral content is responsible in sodium, an unperverted, unadulterated, form of sodium that's still bound to chloride. One of the things, here's the list, regulates the amount of water, the water content in our bodies. Also, due to the fact that in one or more of the different types of sea salt, there are 4 minerals in there that have a pH of 14, essentially potassium, rubidium, cesium, and sodium. All 4 of those minerals have a pH of 14, and by virtue of that and the broad spectrum of the remainder of the minerals, it promotes a healthy pH balance inside the cells, and particularly in the brain cells. Also assists in the generation of hydroelectric energy inside of our cells. 70 millivolts of current is electrically is considered a healthy cell. There's a problem with the cell. It's not producing 70 millivolts of current. Some of you people who might know something about batteries and electricity and things like that might start thinking about, what the total impact is of tens of trillions of cells in our bodies, all generating each 70 millivolts of current. I'll let you ponder that. Assists also in the absorption of food particles through our intestinal tract. That's why many of these minerals are extremely important, including the sodium. Promotes bone strength, supports libido, promotes sinus health, supports respiratory health, and boy howdy, I can tell you that it does. Prevention of muscle cramps, promotes vascular health, assists in regulating sleep patterns and ameliorating the symptom known as insomnia, promotes blood sugar health, and there are actually a couple of trace minerals in there that go directly to promoting good blood sugar health, which would be chromium, I believe is one of them, and I'm not sure whether the other one is vanadium, and selenium. All three of those, which are in the pink Himalayan sea salt. Helps also in the prevention of cellulite, rheumatism, arthritis, and gout, and reduces kidney and gallbladder stones.
Nice. Real quick before I let Mike discuss some of that. The sea salt. So on the converse of that, people who are chronically dehydrated, they're probably experiencing symptoms like what? Like severe headaches, migraines, muscle cramps, and what else could you?
Probably just something.
Maybe overall body pain.
Triggered. Well, magnesium pretty much takes care of it for body pain, as the elements in the sea salt that we're talking about goes. You said something there that I don't know what it was. I'm sorry. Repeat the question again for me.
Yeah. So we were talking about how pink Himalayan salt is beneficial for keeping the body hydrated, and you were listing off some of the beneficiary aspects of that. So on the converse of that, somebody who is chronically dehydrated, they're likely experiencing. There's tons of people out there who have just chronic migraines or headaches or muscle cramps, stuff that are clear symptoms of dehydration.
I would say that, that people like that are probably experiencing, generally speaking, three things. They're chronically dehydrated. They have chronically high levels of free radicals in the body, and they have chronic acidity.
Okay.
As goes to pH, whether in the body, the saliva, or the bloodstream, because the antithesis of those three things, in other words, keeping yourself well hydrated, taking like vitamin C, for example, to neutralize free radicals in the body, and anything else that you can do to increase oxygen levels in the body, because that goes directly to pH. The more oxygen in the body, in any part of the body, especially if you can take pH measurements there, the more oxygen that is there, the higher the pH. And the converse is true also. The higher the pH that you measured, the more oxygen that exists there. They're directly proportional to one another. So they clearly have a problem in one, two, or all three of those areas. They're not maintaining proper hydration. They're not doing something in the form of nutrition, in form of antioxidants to cancel the free radical activity and the reactive oxygen species of all this crap in the body by replacing the missing electron from these molecules with an antioxidant and neutralizing their damaging effects on the body. And by virtue of all that, they would have a low pH, and the body would be acidic. That combination of those three is deadly.
Right. So we got roughly 22 or plus, maybe a little bit more minutes left in this scheduled conversation. Mike, I want you to talk about, after Mike discusses what I'm going to ask him to discuss, Jack, I definitely want you to share with the listeners some solutions to this. As far as yesterday, we were talking about how salt can help with pain or headaches, and how you've told me before, putting a teaspoon of salt in water. I want you to get to that here in a few minutes. But before we get to there, Mike, as far as what Jack was just talking about, as far as salt. And the benefits of that, a little bit ago you were talking about how in the 70s athletes, largely football players, were given like salt tabs to stay hydrated. So for any athlete it's important to stay hydrated, whether it's a marathon runner, football player, or in reality any human being, period. But in this case, the athlete, what have you seen over time as far as hydration, and it's specifically salt, and even when it comes to stuff like Gatorade, how whether it's a team or Gatorade itself, pushing this product, saying that it claims to do something. So you want to talk about that real quick, Mike?
Well, I mean, again, just because I'm still in the process of continuously learning, but from what I see right now about I guess the biggest word, balance, and when people talk about creating an electrolyte balance, obviously we got to make sure kids are getting water. But let's say again that giving out the salt tablets wouldn't allow the inner compartments of the cell to fully hydrate. If it actually was the other way around, where it was causing them not to be able to get water into the intercellular components of the muscle to stay hydrated. Well, what we see with these issues of athletes that are dehydrated, it's an issue of their blood volume. The water content of the blood reduces. Their heart's cardiac output reduces. Their peak VO2 reduces. These are all issues that we don't want to happen, but the issues are their side effects of other things that are coming. So now you've got the mixture of the practice because of the loss in blood volume, loss in cardiac output, loss in stroke volume, loss in peak VO2. You're still doing work that's going to be the way the practices are structured that are high intense. And with all these cascade of events, you've got a person who's got a delivery system that can't deliver the heat, get rid of the heat as fast as it's produced. What kind of troublesome to me to some extent is young people that can be tested right from the beginning on where do they stand. Are they at 20 milliliters on a peak VO2, which is equivalent to a 65-year-old man being poor? And I've tested just a bunch of young men that are in their 20s. That you just wouldn't believe it at that young age. They could be that poor, but they are. Their aerobic capacity is very low. Well, what's the difference between having a low cardiac output from dehydration versus having a low cardiac output because you're unfit? And then if either one of them goes to the same extent, how it causes heat that's gained from the body through muscle metabolism to eventually become stored, to eventually lead to exertional heat stroke. Either one caused the same thing, being unfit or being dehydrated. So it's like anything, trying to learn if there has to be a balance, and Jack was talking about the pH. Well, here's another example where we know athletes with higher mitochondria development can do higher amounts of repeated work without getting above the lactic threshold that would cause the pH to drop. I mean, they can just do more repeated work. Well, here we are talking about something right now that's supposed to keep the balance of alkaline and acidity more neutral, just because you've got the right balance of the right type of salt that has those minerals that aids in that. So if it aids in that, then he's telling us it's better. Well, then that's learning.
Okay.
That's what athletes do.
Sorry to interrupt. So again, from my recollection and for the listeners' recollection, if I remember correctly, salt helps the water. Salt helps the body retain water. Is that accurate?
Well, it's actually a little bit more detailed than that. The proper salt, the full spectrum mineral salt,
correct,
allows the blood albumin to hold on to the water.
Okay.
It's when you're using the wrong kind of salt that you're going to be dealing with edema and swelling, along the lines of gravity from the bottom to the top, ankles, calves, legs, whatever. That's the way it works. And the problem is the minerals are not present. You've got a perverted form of sodium, so the blood albumin cannot hold on to the water. It spills out of the blood and begins pooling in the body in the order of gravity.
Somebody told me recently that salt plays a role in blood pressure. Is that accurate?
Actually, yeah. I've got some notes here from something that you might want to look at this, Mike. Actually, I definitely know that you would. Let me see what page I'm on here. Page 14. Here's a few things regarding the consequences of dehydration. Each 1% of dehydration increases body temperature by about 1 to 2/10 of a degree centigrade. Heat loss by evaporation of sweat is decreased when a person is dehydrated. Each 1% of dehydration increases the heart rate by approximately 4 beats per minute. And when dehydration exceeds 2%, work performance is decreased. That's according to Kennethick and Saka in the Journal of American, I think that's Journal of American Collective Nutrition collection, Journal of American Collection or Collect. I'm not sure what the COLL is. That's dated back in 2007, and this is just one page of several pages of a PDF file. I don't know whether you've ever read this, Mike. It's called Oral Rehydration Therapy, based on a meeting. They call it the OLE meeting in St. Petersburg, Florida, July 1st, 2009. And I thought something like this would be rehydration therapy. Ezra Steiger, MD, Cleveland Clinic, referenced the OLE picnic in July 2009, and it's a PDF about. Well, it looks like it would be great for with regard to sports, in high levels of exertion and proper hydration. The whole thing is it's a PDF presentation. The first interesting page I saw in here, they use this to make a connection in case, anybody had ever seen the movie, but there's a full-page picture of Adam Sandler in the movie The Water Boy. Did either one of you see that?
Yeah.
I high quality.
Right, high-quality H2O. The coach and Adam get into an argument. Coach says Gatorade not only quenches your thirst better, it tastes better too. Does that sound like? That sounds like the guys, on the street there that created that advertising. Bobby responds, no, you people are drinking the wrong water. Coach, Gatorade. Bobby says H2O. Coach says Gatorade. Bobby says H2O. Coach starts singing, water sucks, it really, really sucks. But, it sucks if you don't have it.
Right.
And there's an interesting section in here on intestinal fluid dynamics and talks about how this stuff works, crosses back and forth, how it works with reference to the intestinal wall and the small bowel, having to do with sugar, water, and sodium, and overall a term that Mike might be familiar with, osmolality.
It has to do with diffusion.
What's that?
I'm not quite sure about that.
Right. It has to do with the diffusion of the elements back and forth in and out of the cell walls.
Okay.
And of course, again, we covered this once before. This is the second page in the presentation here. It talks about acute fluid volume deficit, low blood pressure, increased heart rates, urine output low, and a note there to resuscitate with isotonic solutions such as ringers. I don't know how practical that would be out in the sports field. It seemed to me if these guys are pretty big guys, you just throw 10 or 12 grams of some good sea salt into some water and tell them to drink it down and, have a seat for 15 minutes, we'll sub you and see how you're feeling in a little while. This stuff, you should be surprised how soon you could get guys back into the game just, putting together some form of solution which can provide the body, especially not with just the minerals in the salt, but combine that with some form of glucose or half fructose, half glucose at the same time, so that when all this stuff is absorbed into the body, you've got the sugar or the glucose and fructose content plus the sodium content and the minerals that are required to draw these things into the cells to power the mitochondria.
Jack, can you reference that PDF one more time for Mike and for any listeners who want to Google search and find that? What would be the best search keywords or whatever to find that?
You can just look for it directly by the file name. It's Steiger, Steiger, and a space, and then the letters ORS, which is Oral Rehydration Solution, space, and then the numbers 0 and 9 .pdf. Okay. I'm sure you'll find more than one place where you can download it from. The title
Okay.
again is oral rehydration therapy.
Okay.
And now that I think about it, there's probably a lot of information in here that people on sports fields all over the country are not familiar with.
But you brought up mitochondria. How does mitochondria play a role when it comes to sodium? And if you want to answer that, Jack, and then I'll let Mike talk about possibly. I'm assuming that if an individual has more mitochondria, then that would help metabolize the sodium better, or how?
Right.
One of y'all
Actually, I don't know how this pans out into a test, but I'm sure if you look into it, there should be a way to determine this. What determines whether or not the body is running at a high metabolic rate, except for external symptoms? One of the indicators of that is whether or not the body's RAA system has been activated. If it hasn't been activated, then the metabolism is running at a higher rate. If the RAA system has been activated, then the metabolism is no longer operating at maximum efficiency. That's where the borderline is right there, and what you're trying to achieve is you're trying to prevent the body's RAA system from having to serve as a backup power supply, so to speak, for all these metabolic processes, by maintaining a high metabolic rate and making sure that the body is getting the nutritional ingredients required for the primary system to operate at such a level so that it is able to maintain the body, repair the body, and regenerate the body.
Understood.
That's why people don't heal as quickly as they used to before. The things that are in our diet, that they're putting in our food, the things they're taking out, are all creating this new environment, this new soil terrain inside our bodies, making it conducive to attack. I'm sorry, that's a bad word. Making the body vulnerable to things that otherwise would have literally no effect on us, simply because the body's internal terrain has been changed, or has been polluted, or has been made toxic.
Okay. Let me see. Well, one thing I want Mike to discuss, Mike, from my understanding, a doctor that's getting ready or in the process of studying Gatorade or something like that?
Well, no, Dr. Goddick with the West Chester Heat Institute, she's done numerous research on, again, heat-related illness and deaths that have happened across the country, and they've everything you can think of from. She wrote a research paper to try to bring more awareness that it wasn't just about hydration. It was about how people with larger body masses producing more metabolic heat and having more mass in surface area was a major risk factor. And
okay.
you can see that with people being bigger. But she's also worked with trying to find, and it sounds like with some of the stuff Jack's been speaking about, she's been trying to find a way of identifying people who lose more salt in their sweat than other people. And whoever loses more salt in their sweat, trying to come up with the correct mixture, the correct balance of what's needed for them to take that can be assumed by the body to help hydration.
Okay, so I must misunderstood or misremembered. So she's not really doing a study on Gatorade, but it sounds like what she's trying to show is that Gatorade is not as effective as
exactly.
It's put out to be.
Is this made out to be? Exactly.
Right, and as we spoke yesterday, Gatorade, of course, if you look at the nutrition facts, it has sodium. Well, then the next question is, what type of sodium? And as we already know, it's that mainstream table salt type of sodium that has little to no nutritional value. Correct?
That's what we're learning. That's what we're learning. Yes.
I want to let both of you know, and anybody else who might be listening, that there are one anomaly. There might be more, one or more anomalies in this PDF file. On page 28, there's a recipe, home recipe for an oral rehydration solution. And for anybody who's listening who is planning on downloading a copy of that or has already downloaded one, I want to make a change in the article. I don't understand. These people did this research and didn't make the distinction either. And people wonder why this is so confusing and not as clear-cut as it actually is. But I would suggest that you replace the 3/4 teaspoon of table salt, which, you know, really is a really way too small amount for hypertonic solution. But I would change that 3/4 teaspoon of table salt to read 3/4. Well, if I had my druthers, it'd be a lot more than 3/4 of a teaspoon, and it wouldn't be table salt. The rest of the recipe, the 4 tablespoons of sugar or sucrose, I would actually replace that with 2 to 4 tablespoons of honey, and the honey will blend in. It probably never really dissolves, but it's drinkable, and it blends in with everything else that's in the jar. The 4th item is 1 teaspoon of baking powder or 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. I would scratch out teaspoon of baking powder altogether and simply use the 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. So for people who are conscious about what they eat and what they drink, and for people who are communicating with their doctors, whether they have pre-existing health issues or whether they're trying to be preventative, when they're talking to their nutritionist or talking to their doctor or talking to the server at a restaurant and they're saying, and their doctor's telling them you need more salt in your diet, or their nutritionist is saying something about salt, or you ask the server at a restaurant, does this have sodium in it or whatever, it sounds like you're saying that people should be much more specific and ask what kind of salt.
Right.
Right.
Or you can do what I do. A lot of times I just take mine with me.
Right.
Yeah.
Mike, go ahead.
Let me finish this up here on this recipe. The 1/2 teaspoon of 20% potassium chloride by prescription is not necessary because you have both potassium and chloride in the sea salt. And the last one, sugar-free artificial flavoring sweetener to taste, don't you dare.
Maybe some lemon juice instead.
Lemon juice is good. I use that quite extensively. Also orange juice. I'm not sure about both of them. As I understand, orange juice, especially if you can find some good organic oranges, is rich in fulvic acid, which is kind of like a force multiplier for the absorption of minerals into the body. But yeah, scratch the last line, sugar-free artificial flavoring or sweetener to taste. If you take that 4 tablespoon, that 3rd line up there, and use 2 to 4 tablespoons of honey, you don't have to worry about the last line. And then eliminate the baking powder reference altogether. Eliminate the potassium chloride reference. So what's that shrink it down to? 4, 5, 6, 5, 4. We had about 3 or 4 lines there of what's really important that's left.
Okay, and that's off page what? Page 28?
Page 28, as my PDF reader is indicating to me, page 28. The title of the page is Home Recipe for ORS, Oral Rehydration Solution.
Okay, Mike. Before I'm gonna wrap up this entire conversation with Jack making recommendations and suggestions as far as what type of salts, whether it's Epsom, sea salt, Himalayan salt, that people should start utilizing in their diets and cutting out table salt completely, as well as medicinal value, whether it's pain, headaches, and so forth. That's what I want to end this conversation on. But before we go there, Mike, do you have any other questions for Jack, or any other things that you want to discuss in relation to what we've been talking about before we kind of start wrapping things up?
I just appreciate the chance to, again, speak about it and learn more about the whole issue. If we've got a better way than what we see going on today, in knowing the relationship of how the body can stay hydrated, and the right, again, getting back to our choices of what we can make choices on. This is something we all have a benefit to learn from. So again, the the way we used to do it and the things that are still going on today. It's about learning what's better. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So it's that's really a great point, and it's like this newfound information that we're kind of learning, and that Jack is really well knowledgeable about how common table salt is really empty in nutritional value. A good comparison would be, everybody out there knows that oranges are great for vitamin C. Well, a good comparison would be like if some, whether it's GMO or not, if some orange that got produced happened to be completely empty in vitamin C, yet they continue to push this orange on us. That might not be the best comparison, but that was really the only thing that I could think of off the top of my head real quick.
Yeah.
So that's why we're trying to get this information out there, as far as people who are conscious in what they're eating. Maybe the listener is experiencing chronic health problems, and it relates to too high or too low sodium. Obviously, the kicker that we're talking about is not necessarily the quantity or volume of salt that's in your diet, although that is important. But what we're getting at here is what type and what kind of salt. Jack, wrapping up this conversation, do you want to make any recommendations or suggestions for people to how to implement, whether it's Epsom salt or sea salts or Himalayan salt into their diet, and even for medicinal use? If you could maybe explain some of that in a matter of 5 to 6 minutes, that'd be great.
Well, in Mike's particular case, on the sports field, in the gym, or anywhere where we've got a lot of high amounts of aerobic activity going on, requiring large amounts of energy, without succumbing to the obvious, the things that you mentioned here earlier, the heat stroke and other things. Probably the best thing, and that's something that they got right in this presentation here by Steiger, is the optimal mode of sodium replacement, period, is going to be a combination of glucose, and the number one form of glucose in terms of amount per weight would be honey, believe it or not, real honey, pure glucose, literally. Although some people speak about a 50-50 mix of glucose and fructose, because fructose is more readily absorbed than the glucose. But the optimal solution on the field would be a combination of sea salt with the full complement, or the fullest possible complement, of elemental and trace minerals, including the electrolytes, which are there as well, in combination with a form of glucose, or 50-50 mix of fructose and glucose. I think will probably ameliorate a lot of the problems that you're having with these type of respiratory and perspirational type related injuries on the field, as far as heat buildup in the body and not being able to get rid of it. The recipe actually allows for that too, because the glucose is there. If we replace what they had listed in there, and if you just substitute, say, 2 to 4 tablespoons of the honey instead, between that, blended in water with a large mineral content in the form of sea salt in a glass, they'd probably be doing better than if they were on an IV solution in the hospital at that point in time. And actually, that's a good place for it to be out there on the field, because you want these minerals. Being constantly replenished out there. One of the things that it will do when a couple of football players run together and smack each other in the heads in terms of concussion, shock, and other biological processes that start falling apart under these conditions, you'll find out that they're not so serious to begin with, and they can be recovered from quite quickly with using these oral solutions.
Right. So you're saying that it's a combination of for instance, somebody out in the football field or even somebody at home, would you suggest like a teaspoon or tablespoon of salt with 20 ounces of water, or what kind of specific recommendation would you make?
The guidelines that I adhere to personally is what I found. And let me ask you a question first of all. Are you familiar with the meaning of the word titration as it's used in determining how much of a thing that the body requires, usually specific elements?
Did you say titration?
Titration, right? Titration.
No,
Okay,
I know
well,
I'm not.
In a 24-hour period, my experience was that at approximately 1 gram of the salt for every 22 pounds of body weight, which for me worked out to right around 7, plus or minus 7 grams in water in a 24-hour period, that was enough, and I'm sure I was titrating on more than just one element there. Large amounts of magnesium, as you know, like in Epsom salts, has a laxative effect on the body. Calcium and a few others, depending on levels in the body, also have the same effect. But what I found is at taking 1 gram per every 22 pounds of body weight, after I finished that solution, the body was at the point where it was at titration for the solution and the combination of minerals contained within it. And titration, as you may or may not know, a lot of people simply refer to it as diarrhea, but all it means is that the body has become saturated to the point, has been saturated with one or more elements to the point where it no longer requires any more. As in the case of titration using large amounts of vitamin C, the same thing applies. And one of the things that I assume that some of us know, maybe some of us don't, is that the sicker or the unhealthier that a body is, the higher levels of vitamin C it can tolerate before the body reaches titration. And what I'm finding also is this is true of the combination of the elemental and trace minerals in the sea salt as well, is the better shape you're in, the less of it you require. The poorer your situation, the more of it the body will tolerate before the body hits titration.
Interesting.
Jack, is it a ceiling that, I mean, again, with everything being to the difference of the individual, is it recommendations out there that because we're talking about the minerals, is it something that somebody would have to say, look, that's way too much to be taken in a day?
Yeah, what's the recommendation for a human being as far as as far as the amount of sodium that somebody should have on a daily basis?
Right, and we're still making the distinction between that and the other, I assume, right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, the RDA tells us was at the USDA Food Safety Department tells us that the RDA for sodium for men under the age of 51, I don't know about women, there's probably some slight deviance, but for men under the age of 51 is 2,400 milligrams a day. And we're assumed since they're feeding us the table salt, they're talking about table salt. And over that, I believe over the age of 51, it's 1,500 milligrams a day. I'll just reiterate something that I mentioned yesterday, that in a 24-hour period, I've consumed 15,200 milligrams of pink Himalayan sea salt, including all of its minerals and everything else, with no, you'd suspect by the information that most of us have about these things that I would be, wound up tighter than a rubber band with a blood pressure that was ready to blow the bulb off the meter, but nothing like that happened.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that was going to be kind of my next question. So
right.
The
difference between the two is like night and day, and I suspected that's where you were going with that.
Yeah, so the government recommends how much again? How many milligrams?
For men 51 and older, 1,500 milligrams a day. Younger, 2,400 milligrams.
Okay,
which
so
if you're talking, yeah,
table salt. Yeah, that's table salt. So
right.
Now, so do you would that mean that you, somebody who completely took table salt out of their diet and switched over to a combination of Epsom, sea salt, Himalayan, whatever, do you think that same amount would be necessary, or do you think because these salts have a broader spectrum when it comes to minerals and nutrients that it could be less? Do you understand?
Well, for a lot of people on an individual basis, that will be a difficult thing for them to ascertain if they've eaten nothing but table salt their entire lives. So,
right.
You've got to kind of take responsibility for your own health and, gather the information and look at the whole thing and determine what you want to do for yourself. But number one, if somebody just went cold turkey and eliminated all packaged and processed food with table salt like sodium that they buy in the store and stuck to the outer rails where all the fruit and vegetables were, and didn't even go out and buy any good sea salt, but just cut the rest of the crap out of their diet completely, they would see they would see better health over a short period of time, just as a result of getting rid of the bad stuff and not doing anything else about it.
Right.
So where do you want to start from there? The recommendations, most of the recommendations that I'm reading are talking about 2 times whatever, switching over to a broad spectrum sea salt, anywhere from 2 to 10 times the amount that you would normally eat in one day. And I'm assuming, and for reference, and with the relative history in the industry and everything, I thought that for my age, 1,500 milligrams would be a good starting place, because this is what's happening, and they're telling us that Americans are not even paying attention to these, regardless of what salt they're eating, although in most instances it's the table salt. The Americans are ingesting 4, 5, 6, 10,000 milligrams of sodium, this other salt a day.
Right, yeah.
I get hypertense just thinking about that.
So if somebody were to switch to, because you made a reference that a high amount of Epsom salt could creates a laxative effect. So I mean, would it be your recommend? I mean, I guess it would not be your recommendation for somebody to substitute table salt completely with something like strictly Epsom salt.
No, absolutely not. Again, right. I'll reiterate something I mentioned at least once yesterday, that the magnesium sulfate is really good for what I term spot treating for pain in the body. If you wake up one morning, you feel some pain somewhere, or you've been out working and like I did here a week or 2 back, slammed the top of the bone below my knee into a 4-inch thick coffee table. I can definitely attest to the fact that grabbing I actually had a half a glass of sea salt and water on the kitchen bar top here with some lemon in it, and I hit it hard. I don't remember, not even in distant history, ever hitting something or being hit that hard by something, at least in the legs. The first thing I did, and I've learned this over time, Mike might know something about this being involved with sports, but the first thing I did was I went into a full squat, which relieved a great deal of the pain. I reached up here on the counter and grabbed a half of the jar of my salt and water, and this is, matter of fact, what made this so memorable is the pain was so intense. I was experiencing nausea, and I was feeling like I wanted to vomit. Okay, well, that's all the shock indicators I need. And after I'd finished off the last half of the glass of sea salt and water that I had up here, not only had the vomiting urge to vomit and the nausea disappeared, the pain was slipping away. I mean, in 5 or 10 minutes I was walking around, it was like it never even happened. No bruise either, no bruise.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and we're really starting to, we're kind of past the call time, but something that one aspect of this conversation we haven't hit on until the very end here, which we kind of talked about yesterday in a preliminary conversation, was the pain aspect, and that you said that pain is because of a lack of oxygen to the cells.
Exactly.
And if you want to say kind of one more time, how does salt play a big role in that?
I'm sorry, how to do what, Mike?
How does salt play a role in that aspect? of getting more oxygen to the cells?
Speaking directly to oxygen in the cells, that is all directly dependent on levels of magnesium in the extracellular fluid to be able to draw hydrogen and oxygen into the cells.
Right, and that's why you're recommending...
There is no other element that impacts it as much as magnesium does.
Right, and which is why you recommended, drinking a small amount of Epsom salt water or something to that effect.
Right, for what I term spot treating for pain here and there, as opposed to, you have to understand you're not trying to turn your health around with this. You've just got a little bit of pain, and you just want it to go away.
Right, so
you don't want to poison your body doing it by taking, drugs with acetaminophen, ibuprofen, naproxen sodium, aspirin. Aspirin is not good for you either, thereby ingesting things like magnesium stearate and titanium dioxide, which they've linked both titanium dioxide and another, not titanium, but another metal, another dioxide, have both been linked to some of the lesser chronic fatigue syndromes like fibromyalgia, the metal dioxides, magnesium stearate, talc. These things are used often as filler in what I call sub-rate pharmaceuticals or sub-rate nutritional supplements.
Okay, so you're suggesting then that this is spot treatment, meaning that it's a quick, immediate, natural form, medicinal form, and it could be for somebody who's experiencing pain, whether
actually I don't even like to use the word medicinal, but it's probably not a big deal. Because when you begin equating your food and your medicine with one another, and you really can't do that until you begin to understand the nutrients that were contained in real food and their effects on the body. But to refer to it that way, that's pretty much it.
Okay, so whether it's somebody who has back pain, back spasms, migraines, or it seems like a number of health-related issues.
Right.
You would suggest taking a 20 glass of, like a 20 ounce or so glass of water, and what amount of salt and what type of salt specifically when it comes to specifically what we're talking about, like spot treatment
right.
for various illnesses, whatever.
Well, this is not a diagnosis or prescription, but what I found works best for me is approximately a heaping half a teaspoon of magnesium sulfate per 150 pounds of body weight.
A heaping half of a teaspoon of magnesium sulfate, also known as Epsom salt, correct?
Right. Common food store Epsom salt. Right.
Okay. And
actually, I'd use that same amount to treat people who weighed another 60 or 70 pounds more than that, just as effectively.
Okay, and you're saying that's somebody up to 150 pounds?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And
wait time's about 15 minutes, but it might vary slightly.
And are you saying 15 minutes to dissolve in the water?
No, until the pain is gone.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, but the idea is to put the salt in the water. Is it necessary that it needs to dissolve?
Well, yeah, stir it up.
Okay.
There's something really scientific going on when you spin that spoon around in there and stir that stuff up. You're actually folding oxygen into it, among other things. You're also energizing it. You're giving energy to it.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this conversation up. Do either one of y'all want to say any lasting remarks?
No, I think it was very educational, and again, thanks, Jack, for coming on.
Sure, you bet.
We'll definitely get some feedback after we get this online. If we had a number of people watch and listen to this, we'll ask the people in the audience, the viewers, if they want us to discuss anything in the future, whether it's mitochondria related, salt related, and we might actually do this again with maybe a doctor and or a nutritionist on the line and see if they have anything contrary to say, or see if they want to affirm any of the stuff that we might have talked about today. So I appreciate everybody's time, and I guess that's it.
Oh, let me add one other thing. If anybody who is listening or will be listening to this has any questions as to scientific references, they can also feel welcome to contact me, and I can make available the scientific research references for any of a good portion of the things that I'm talking about here, so they can read these things for themselves.
Awesome. Really appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording right now.